correctly.
It's still offline.
Hang on. It takes a bit. Like a minute.
Spamming the headphone.
The streaming service OBS did not tell us that it couldn't connect to the streaming server this time. So hopefully without errors, that probably means it either worked or is horribly broken.
I don't think it really matters.
It's
up.
Oh, cool. And
Let me turn my sound so you can hear this glorious.
You're gonna hear yourself say, "Oh, it's up."
Awesome.
is it spouting anything from your?
Mine always on.
Oh, okay.
Hang on.
Now my face will be immortalized on
You
YouTube.
should raise your font though.
My font. Crap.
YouTube. Lug.pizza/live.
Does anybody have a? This is a mouse. What's this plugged into?
It's the effort.
Lug.pizza/live.
Okay.
Does anybody
Is my screen up? Why is my screen blinking?
I don't know.
OBS is broken.
We're so well, guys.
What the fuck did you do to OBS?
Okay, everyone turn on the live stream. Otherwise, this will be terrible. Give me one in the future.
Is my desktop still blinking?
No, it's not.
What is that? That's so broken. Look, I can scroll.
I think you fucked it up by running it on my GPU.
Is it everyone? No.
Is it blinking?
Yes.
I haven't done it to YouTube though, so. Is it working now?
I think it is.
The screen was blinking a second ago. That's what I was.
Everything looks blinky. I mean, I guess it's blinking a little bit.
Whatever. We'll deal.
We can fix it.
Hey, tell me when the font size is good. Is this big enough? Okay. Everybody can read this fine.
No. Your face is in the bottom corner. Yeah, because your face is at the top left, so the console terminals.
Oh god, that's a good point.
Yeah, change your background image to just blue, so if it flashes, it's no bigger.
It won't matter because we're going to be on a terminal the whole time. So you're just going to see the terminal flash incessantly.
It looks like awesome.
No, right now it should just be on a terminal. This is what it's supposed to be streaming.
No, but we can see your desktop background.
Can you make the font slightly bigger though? Just like probably.
Actually, we changed the
We're already like 15 minutes over, so we got to start eventually. Is this big enough for you? Giant ass size 20 font.
System power. Just taking a minute to like just install like control.
This is really.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Cool.
It's still flashing randomly.
So that's all out of. And I'm not changing my background image. That'd take too long. I'd have to like open GIMP up and everything. What are you doing?
Can we have Linux news first?
Yeah, I don't have any Linux news for you though.
Also, the GitHub, or not GitHub.
GitLab.
Had like a huge data meltdown. Yeah, that's the best way to word it.
GitLab proved to
We're
be.
doing this live stream in honor of the GitLab live stream. Basically, what they did is they live streamed like their 4 engineers like trying to restore all the production data. So that was kind of fun. That's awesome.
That's amazing. Is that the only Linux news you wanted to shout out?
The moral of that story is always
Yeah, always make sure your 5 backups actually work.
Making sure one backup works would be a good first start.
I have a command of the day.
Sure, what is it?
So, what you could do? So you have SSH on you now, the daemon.
I can start the daemon.
You You know, and you don't have like your anything blocked.
Apparently, I already have SSH started, which isn't good.
So if you want to easily allow me to shell into your computer, which of course you can do is you can curl any person if they use GitHub and they have their public
What's the URL?
At the HTTPS.
yeah, GitHub, you want to curl github.com/ my username, so Richard Stalin, dot keys. And append that to your authorized key list.
I'm not going to append that to my authorized key list, Colin.
So if you do that, then I can show
Oh God. You can.
I can't, yeah, don't worry.
No, so you can. You might be able to do it on that, but I'm pretty sure I do not actually have my authorized keys set up to do anything.
You sure?
Are you talking about?
Do like, yeah, .sh.
Whoa, wait, my personal?
Yeah, not the root.
Okay. Fair enough.
Authorized running keys. Yeah. So now, what's your IP address?
Here you go.
Okay, one second. I gotta find me Marsh at
Do I have wall? I do.
that was me the Texas Whoa, that's obnoxious.
Congratulations, Colin.
Wait, delete all his files.
Okay, I'll just go ahead and do rm-rf and see if, so if you can try to shut down that, but it actually keeps me in the thing for like 2 seconds. So you can see that, like, as long as I keep typing stuff, I think, then the more Actually, I should do the, like, while.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Where the hell is your connection?
I'll just go ahead and disconnect. So that's kind of like an easy way if you want someone to like shell it to your. I already.
Okay, good.
So if you want to allow someone to like really easily access it.
If you want to allow Colin to also spam you with wall messages, now you know how. Yeah, that's a good idea.
You didn't have the power before.
Also, I'm going to do this because I had no idea I was running that.
Leaking it? Oh,
He's disabled.
Apparently I had it running by default, which is terrible. Any other news that you want to shout? Taking all my time up. Okay. So today we're going to be going over both. So how many? First thing, because I don't know what people are here for, if they're here for the more interesting advanced stuff or if they don't know scripting at all. Who here is comfortable with scripting? And by comfortable, I don't mean like pro, I just mean at all. Okay, so there's a good portion of you that's not. Who here has used a shell like day to day at all?
Why don't you ask what this new if you haven't used one?
New to the lug, you mean, or what?
New to using a shell.
Well, I was going to explain what a file system was first. That's kind of why I wanted to. There are parts I can skip. About what are you curious about?
Like how many people have not used a shell?
Okay, how many of you haven't used a shell? Okay, well, I'll explain it from the beginning for his benefit then. First thing, the shell is kind of a wrapper around the whole Sys5 POSIX compatible system in general. Before you can do anything, it's good to know about a file system. I'm going to ask, do you know what a file system is? The guy who hasn't used a shell before. Okay, cool. So a file system is... Yeah? No, it's right there. I didn't even manage to kill Zeesh. What the fuck did you do, Colin? So this is a file system. It's just all your folders and such. If you've used Windows, I imagine you've also probably run into the file system concept before. You have the root directory. That's the base for your file system. It's just /, and then whenever you have a folder, it's just, whatever name, what have you, user. Then it's another /, another directory, etc., until you get to an actual file, and then you don't have another directory. Really important for any sort of shell use to know conceptually what a file system is. I'm not going to go into too much how a file system works, but what I am going to say is when you're running a shell, you always have a current working directory. And this is the directory that your shell is working from. You can see it with PWD. So anything I run is going to be run from home mining marsh. That's the directory. You can change it. We can go back to the original. When you actually run commands, the shell interprets them as such. If you have a / as the first character, then it interprets that as you giving it a command in the file system that's just a path. So, actually, it's probably bin. Yeah. If you do not start it with a /, two things could happen. If you don't have any slashes at all in your command, it's going to assume you're doing some sort of command that you need to search for. And if you do have a / somewhere in the command, then it's going to take this as a relative path. So instead of going from the root of the file system and climbing down, it's going to check relative to the directory you're working in. There are two special files in every directory. There's /, which stands for current directory, and there is /, which is the directory above. So you can always construct a path to wherever the heck you want to go without actually having to give it a full path. If you do not give it any path at all and it's just a command, it'll search for the command in a specified way. I'll get into that a bit later, but suffice to say there's a few directories that it will check to see if your program's in. So if I run echo, it'll find that it's already in bin echo and just run that instead. Other things that you need to know about running a command before we can get anywhere else is commands typically have 3 file descriptors for them. A file descriptor is just a file that the program can use. One of those file descriptors is for your keyboard, so you can type things. Another one is the standard output device, which is where it prints the thing. Cat just takes whatever you type and prints it again. And there is another one called to, which is the error stream. And whenever a program wants to print an error, it's going to print it through to instead of printing it through 0 or 1. 0 is your input, 1 is your output. By the way, if you have any questions at all, just interrupt me whenever you want. I'm going to go kind of fast because it took us a bit to get the streaming set up, and I have a lot to go through. Just interrupt me whenever the hell you want, about anything really.
Josh, you're reaching a far wider audience than you think. You're reaching students' investigation right now.
Really? Did you tell people to watch this?
Yeah, it's literally one of the first ones.
Oh boy.
Like, who's not here?
Fair enough.
Oh, I don't know.
Any?
5 people in total are watching.
Oh man. Okay. So, where was I? Okay. The only other thing you really have to care about for running processes is every process has a set of what's called environment variables. And these are just, they're a value assigned to a name. And whenever you run a program, it gets a copy of the program that ran its environment variables and all their values. The program can manipulate its own environment variables, and this is kind of a way to pass information down the process tree. The shell in particular presents all of these environment variables as actual variables in the shell that you can access by just typing their name out with a $sign in front of it, and it will replace that with the value of this. So when I run this command, it's actually replacing this before the command's even run, and it's running this. So another nice thing about the shell is you don't actually have to pass every single environment variable you have down into whatever program you're calling. So everything that you've inherited, you're also going to put down in the tree, but you can add arbitrary variables like, I don't know, and if I run a program like echo, it's not going to see some var. If I want to explicitly allow echo to see that, I can do some var. And now, whatever some var was echo, when it runs, it can probe its environment variables and see that. It's not going to do anything right now because it's not actually searching for that. But a lot of programs expect you to set environment variables before you run them. That's the most basic things about the shell. We're going to start getting into some of the more the actually interesting things you can do with it. First and foremost, the 3 file descriptors for input, output, and error are not set in stone. So if I run cat, and cat just takes stuff from its input and pipes it straight to its output, that's really boring, and you'd be wondering, why is this a thing? The reason why is because the shell, because POSIX allows file descriptors to be anything really, the program doesn't actually know what input, output, and error is. All they know is that it's a file that you can read, write, and write to. Because of this, the first thing we're going to go over, one of the things you can do, is take the output from one program and bind it to the input of another program. And this is where cat's actually useful, is all cat does is take the input from echo and prints it again. And this little pipe character is what does that. This pipe character between 2 program invocations takes the output of the first program and sticks it in the input of the second program. Another example of this, there's a program called grep that prints out anything that matches the arguments you give it. So if I said grep hi, I typed a bunch of stuff, and it sees hi, it'll print those lines out. So if I want to grep a file, I could do something like, I don't think it's going to find anything, but who knows, it found stuff. You can also just grep for the file name, but the point is you can kind of combine programs like that. So for example, if I wanted to find every line with hi in it, and then I wanted to sort them alphabetically, I could just add another program to the bunch called sort. It'll sort them alphabetically. And now, instead of having to write one big, ugly program that finds lines and sorts them, we can just write a sorting program and write a finding program, and now we can strap them together. Another thing you can do is, instead of outputting to another program, you can output to a file. So if I wanted to take these sorted lines and store it for later, I can use this little arrow that says take the output of the standard file descriptor of 1, the output, and stick it in a file. Now if I look at that file, we have those lines in there. If you want to stick a descriptor other than output, like let's say you want to descript the file descriptor, you just stick the number of that descriptor in front of the arrow. 0 is input, 1 is output, 2 is error. You can have other file descriptors that you manually build, but those are the only ones you really need to remember. You could, in theory, pipe its input to a file. It wouldn't really be useful. So let's, just to show we can do that, let's go ahead and put the error to the file. And it prints all of that to the output because the output's no longer been redirected, and the file's empty because it didn't actually print any errors. One last thing that a program can actually expose is, the only other outside information a program can expose is an exit code. This is either going to be 0 for the program executed successfully, or some other number, which means the program failed. This little variable of question mark prints the exit code of the last program run. So that's what I was doing there. So now we're actually ready to start combining this into scripts to do useful little things. What? I am pulling Emacs up. Probably because I don't actually remember how to increase the font size. Control X plus. Cool. You have it figured out. Thank you, Jay. I've never had to do that. I'm going to leave that there. So,
You have to do it for every buffer and see what configure.
oh God, Emacs Y. So let's say we want to make a script. Actually, we'll just remove that line. So basically, if you can imagine, this program right here that's actually taking my input in and running programs is not anything special. It's just another program. The most common one you'll see is Bash, the born-again shell. I'm using ZSH for reasons. If there's anything specific to ZSH that's different, I'll point them out. So let's say you don't want to keep typing this thing over and over again, and you just want a program that takes all occurrences of hi and sorts them. So instead of having to type that over and over again, the most obvious thing you could do, and maybe it's not obvious, but if you were to think about it, this is probably, for a good bit, it's probably the first thing you'd come up with, is just store these to a file and pipe that file to the input of a program. And by the way, this little arrow outputs to a file. The arrow in the opposite direction does the opposite. It takes a file and puts it as the input of a program. So now if I wanted to run the commands in this file, I could just pipe that file into ZSH, and ZSH would run the commands. Unfortunately, for the fact that ZSH is actually looking for keyboard and user input and stuff means this doesn't really do anything interesting right now. I could actually echo some stuff to it, and this would correctly... Oh, I'm sorry. Why is... Oh, that's a fair point. I've seen that done before for other things. Yeah, you could. But I was trying to... Yeah, it doesn't matter. The point is, this doesn't really... This kind of shows the point. This doesn't work too well, having to run the saved lines in a file by piping them to a shell. It's kind of messy. To get around that, there is something called the shebang. It's just these two little lines here. If the first two characters of a file are the hash sign and the bang symbol, when you can run that file as an executable, and whatever the first line is, the file will be passed to that program as a script, as the first argument. So it'd be the equivalent of doing this every time we wanted to run it. But now we can just run the file instead. Another thing I should cover that I didn't occur to me to cover a minute ago, but I just realized people are going to run into this. If you're trying to make your own scripts, and you get this issue. Oh man. You're going to get permission denied because the program is not marked to run. One of the security features of Unix is you're not actually allowed to run files that are not marked as an executable file. Really easy to do. Just run this command to make the file executable. The +X stands for plus executable, and it's just modifying the permissions on that file.
Did you not initially make it executable, or?
My Emacs is set up to, whenever it saves a file that it sees a shebang in, it'll go ahead and mark the file as executable. Another thing you'll notice is I can't, well, this is a bad example. I'm going to rename this file. I can't actually run this command by just typing test2 because this is not in one of those search paths that I was talking about a little bit, and I can get into that more now. Basically, whenever you run a command without a path in it, it actually checks this variable, this environment variable. It splits it on these colons, and then all of the directories it finds split by these colons are the directories it's going to search for your executable. So I could add the current directory to my path, and now I should be able to run test2. just like I would on Windows, or you can just type the command. Normally that's not standard, and you actually have to type in the command as a relative directory command. By the way, if there's any command you see me typing that you want to know what it does, go ahead and let me know. I'm not going into a large set of the commands themselves because I'm focusing more on how the shell itself works. It would take me forever to try and go through like a standard set of utilities you can use. I will say a few real quick. Like, you can use move to rename a file. You can use CP to copy a file. Echo to say something. You can use cat to look at a file. A few things like that. But I'm not going to go too much into depth with all that. In addition to having, now that we're actually starting to do scripts, you know, they can get big and ugly. So let's say, I don't know, I wanted to search for hi and do a bunch of other stuff. Sort it. Get rid of lines that are the same, etc. You would and then assign the output of that to a variable. You could keep doing all this, and it would get kind of ugly. So you can actually create functions as a script in most shell languages. Usually the syntax is you put the name of the command, and I'm going to go ahead and shift to SH mode because this is not, there we, oh god. There. It kind of mimics the aesthetic of functions in other languages, but you'll notice you don't put any arguments inside of the list, and there's no return value. You never put arguments in the list. Your arguments are actually determined whenever the program's called. If you're running ZSH, you can also append this with function. I like to do that. It's nicer looking. I've had mixed results with Bash depending on the version. I think all of ZSH supports this. Another thing though is, I didn't point this out a second ago. If you want to store the output of a command in a variable, you do it as such. Basically, when you have the $sign with just a name, it's going to assume you're trying to access a variable, but the $sign has a bunch of other things you can do with it too. If you have a name that's kind of got spaces or a lot of stuff in it, you can access the same variable by surrounding it with curly braces. If you do a $sign and then parentheses, it'll actually run whatever's inside the parentheses and then replace the whole thing with that. So if you want to store the output of a command in a variable, you actually just tell it to replace the string you're assigning the variable with the output of that command. Double quotes lets you assign things to variables with spaces in them. If you want to literally assign the value, $sign, open parenthesis, whatever, you put it in single quotes instead of double quotes, and it will no longer expand most of these things. We could do this, but it's not really guaranteed to work. Usually you want to stick everything in parentheses. If we wanted another set of parentheses inside of this, you just stick another set of parentheses. The shell is smart enough not to cause issues because it sees that you're running a command inside of the string, so it's not going to have issues with the extra set of parentheses. If you want to have a literal parenthesis in here, it's the same as C, backslash parenthesis. Sorry? You'll notice if I go ahead and do type grep hi into this, you might not expect this to work because where you might expect that grep will take the input of the keyboard like it will, excuse me, if you're just running the command standalone. That's what it looks like it'll do. In reality, whenever you have a freestanding program invocation like this, the shell will go ahead and attach the input to the scripts to the input of that first statement. So I can do that, and grep will correctly see the hi, even though it's not getting piped in. The same thing with functions. Functions, actually, getting back to these, are just a handy way of combining commands. You can have variables inside of functions. They are not local to the function, So any variables you set inside of a function can be seen outside of the function unless you're using ZSH, in which case there is a local keyword for local variables. Bash has local? When did Bash get all these nice things? Did Bash 4, when did Bash 4 come out? It's just Z shell now. So you can have local vars now, but same thing as before. If you have a freestanding program or invocation, it'll go ahead and attach the standard in of the function itself to the standard in of that program. So if I run this, it will still correctly connect my keyboard up, and grep will see the high. And basically, invoking functions is the exact same way you'd invoke a program, and if it doesn't find the program on disk, it'll run the function instead. If it finds it, I think it actually searches functions before programs, but I wouldn't really suggest naming your functions the same as programs. It sounds like a bad idea to me. Yeah.
What are some cool applications of
What's?
I don't know, finding the word I in a text file.
Yeah, I have a lot of different things.
Like,
I'm sure I have something in here.
but I'm just curious what you personally actually use scripts for, regular.
I have a lot of disgusting things I use scripts for. For example, my Bumblebee service is horribly broken, so I actually have a script that just runs 24/7 in the background and restarts my graphics driver if it detects that X is running.
How often does that run?
10 seconds.
That's why it's like
What's causing this error on your
No. So actually, you'll notice it will not restart it unless it's actually, let's see, aux started. No, this doesn't actually restart it right now. Basically, it'll check if X is started, it'll restart it once, and then it won't do it again until it sees X shut down and restart again. So it won't keep doing this. Another thing, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I already have that pulled up, but I don't want to go through a million of these. We have a bunch of scripts. This is another one I actually... Oh god, Gazoogle. Does this still work? So, Transizzle still works. Let's see, do I have anything...
What's the purpose of it?
Transizzle translates text into whatever the hell Michael found to do this. Yes.
That's disappointing.
Oh, it didn't do anything. I'm disappointed. Is there a readme? Oh, there is.
We know what it does.
Translate gangsta. Oh man, are we allowed to show this? Anyhow, this is not my fault. That's not my fault. Oh, this is something I added a while back. I also use it for, this is an entire ad block implemented just in ZSH. This runs as a cron job on my system and generates this monster. So, yeah, I put this in the scripts directory a long time ago and it's been working ever since. Anyhow, I'm going to get back to this just so I'm not, I have a bunch of stuff I could show you, because my system is like a disgusting hodgepodge of scripts everywhere. Like, you could probably find like a billion ZSH scripts running. There's one, here's one right here. It changes my Skype setting, my Skype thing every 5 minutes. Here's one. Works with my temperature daemon. Here's another one, that one I was talking about earlier. I have like a bunch of... My system is almost nothing but ZSH scripts I've written. That's the secret of my Gentoo system, is it's actually just ZSH.
So you're saying that if I uninstall ZSH, everything looks great?
My system might not boot if you uninstalled ZSH.
That's what I should have done.
Oh man, you're a jerk.
Just RM.
So, back to this. As I mentioned earlier, variables are exposed to subprograms. Functions are not. Functions are not part of POSIX. Environment variables are, so you can't actually, none of these functions will get seen in lower scripts or anything. These commands won't be able to be seen. That's actually covers a good bit of it before I get into less of the basics of shell stuff and more into the crazy specific things that I've found that you can do with shells. So if there's any questions you have at this point before I start diverging into that, this would be a really good time to ask.
Man versus humans.
So I watch one really, messing around and typing, I guess how it's a program. Sometimes you use like less than symbol.
So if you have, so there's a few different symbols. There's pipe. That takes the input of the program before it and puts it, or I'm sorry, it takes the output of the first program and puts it as the input to the second program. So if I do this, it's going to run echo. Echo's going to print hi, and then it's actually going to take the hi that echo prints and pipe that right into grep. So now grep, it's the equivalent of me typing hi into grep. The greater than symbol is if you want to put that output in a file instead of another program. So if you want to save the output of a big long thing you've run, you can do that. So now if I look at list, it should be hi. The less than symbol does the opposite of the greater than symbol. Instead of taking a command and outputting it to a file, it takes a file and inputs it to a command. So if I wanted to search for hi in that file, instead of using the greater than, I'd use the less than to put the, and you can see it as an arrow pointing in the direction of where you want the stuff to go. Anything else? AFU? AFU is this suggestions thing you see. So like if I type DD on an IF, it's just this little autocomplete thing. It's a plugin I'm running for ZSH. It's really nice. Yeah, I've been trying to get rid of that for the longest time, and without actually straight up like rewriting the script, and I might just have to do that. Yeah.
So I want to make a Z shell point that changed the context of the current line. How do I go about this? For example, here's my idea. Whenever you type in cat, I want to replace it with an emoji of cat. Whenever you draw like a pipe,
You can't do that, I'm pretty sure. So
replace it
you,
with like a Mario.
if you can, I have no idea how. And as I said earlier, this is actually not specifically about ZSH. I'm using ZSH, but this is about scripting. I know a good amount about ZSH, but not a ton. Oh, but actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because it reminded me.
Plug into a Z shell, and I figured
One thing you should know, any command you stick in, if you're running bash, it's going to be bash rc. If it's ZSH, it's going to be ZSHRC. These are commands that are run when you start your shell up. So if I run another terminal, it's going to run all the commands in that file. That's a good thing to know.
Wait, so why can't you just do what happened here? That's more logic.
Because AFU is actually using a variable called RPS1. RPS1 is not actually the current line. RPS1, so there's two lines. There's PS1. This is PS1. It's your prompts. ZSH actually supports another variable called RPS1, which is a prompt on the right side that disappears once you have text that goes over it. So if I type a bunch of crap, AFU will go away. But that's not like the current line, that's just, yeah.
Can you not just override that variable and have
I did. But the problem is because, basically, yeah, AFU's set up to rerun as you type things. and replace the RPS1, so my customization goes away. I actually already have that set up because I have Vim key bindings for my ZSH, and usually it'll print normal mode on the RPS1 if I'm in normal mode, but AFU just doesn't let that even work. Anything else before I get on to crazy things? So probably the first thing that I want to demo, just because I wrote it specifically for this presentation, because I thought it would be a fun thing to do, is just to show that you can actually do interesting things with the shell. Is I strapped a module system on top of ZSH. I'm not going to go through all the code right now because it's long and harmful, but the general idea is now I can write a script. Now I can write a script that executes my little wrapper script here, shell, and I can show this little wrapper script because it's short and easy. All this is doing is it's creating a temporary directory, it's creating a temporary script in there. Whatever file you pass in, it's going to prepend this shebang to it, and it's going to prepend this little line to source our custom startup file. And then it's going to take the rest of our input file, cat it out to the script, and then it's going to run it, passing any other arguments in. So now, with this little wrapper script in hand, we can write a program that uses it. And instead of having to source our files, I added the equivalent of Python's import statement, but as a use statement. So now I can tell you, you seem really, really scared of this for some reason. So now I can do use standard.list, and it will actually go use this, import the correct file from down here, and do crazy things in the standard directory. It'll import both this and a few other files. I don't know what that is. It looks like. It'll also import this just because of the way I set it up. If you'll notice, these scripts actually have public and private functions they can create. I'm using here docs for the function bodies just because. Sorry, what?
It's so confusing for people.
Yeah, I said this would get into the more interesting, crazy stuff. I didn't want this to be just beginner stuff, because we have the beginner stuff every semester, so I wanted this to be a mix. I can do. So now, if I do that, I can call standard lists test1. This file only had to declare the function as test1. It didn't have to put its module prefix, and this should correctly call that function. And it does. So you can do enough with ZSH to strap like a full module system on top of it if you need to. Yeah, I've spent too much time in the shell. The reason why you can do this, if you haven't used ZSH before, and one of the reasons you shouldn't be using bash, ZSH exposes every function you create in a hash map called functions. So, I don't know, what function do we want to do? Let's create a function. So now if I go actually look at this, it'll show the body of the function. If you modify this variable in the hash map, you actually modify the function itself. This is how I implemented the module system, but
How often does it like regenerate? Like if you modified the function, how long would it take it to realize that that's not actually working?
as soon as you do the assignment, I can, so let's say I can go ahead and just to show you. Now I can run HiFunc. It is really scary. But a few of the things you can do with it. First things first, if you want to, does anybody here not know POSIX signals? They'd take a few minutes to explain. Okay. Basically, you can, have you ever used the kill command? That's actually sending a kill signal to the program you're running. And basically, there's like a defined set of signals you can run to a program. And programs, when they retrieve these signals, they can do things with them. So some programs can ignore your kill for that reason. Point is, what I'm getting at is what did you do? There we go. I'll do it here. If I want to run something in the script that is going to happen when the script exits, I can use the trap function and specify the signals that it will run on. So if I do this and I run that command again, it should say hi because it exited, which activated the trap. You can call functions this way. None of that's terribly interesting yet.
You should put echo sleep, right chevron, high chevron, usage.
So this is not terribly interesting yet because you can only have one function on your trap call. So if you have two traps, the second one will overwrite the first one. Kind of annoying. Because let's say you make a temporary directory and you want to remember to delete it when you're done. It's gonna not work, and then I make another temporary directory and I want to delete it when I'm done. It's only gonna delete the second directory because the second trap overrides the first. This sounds not very useful until you realize that we do have this functions array that we can modify. And now, with that in mind, we can write a version of Golang's defer that will take commands and append them to... Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong file. Oh my god. Yeah, ZSH does have generics. Yeah, sure, go for it. So now...
Can you edit your kernel type this? Alias, space, okay. Control Shift U. Okay, and you do 1F638.
What are you doing?
Just trust me.
No. I did Control Shift and it aliased Control Shift U. Oh look, it disappeared. Sorry?
You did Control U, not Control Shift.
No, Control Shift U. Look, I promise you. So I'm typing Control and I have Control held down. Now the Shift key is held. The next step of this equation is I'm pressing the U. Oh look, my alias disappeared.
Sorry, I shouldn't keep reeling so much. So you can make an alias for the cat emoji to the
Oh god.
cat.
Oh, I forgot to mention aliases. So if you want to save a function that is not in a script, just because you're being lazy, you can use alias. And basically, if I wanted to alias EC to echo, whenever I type EC now, it's actually going to run echo. It's just another sweet little thing. Anyhow, back to this defer thing. You can write an std append a function, which takes a function name and rewrites the function in the functions array to have whatever you have in front appended. This is all you need to implement the entirety of defer. So now, sorry? So now, if I source, and I have to do this because this is not actually part of my module system, this is something I've had for a long time and use a lot in a lot of my scripts. So now, if I do temp is equal to make temp d to make one temporary directory, and another one I can just do And just like Go, it'll run these in reverse order and clean everything up, so now you don't have this trap issue anymore. Yeah?
Can deferred functions, can they add to the deferred stack to make it another?
You want to make a, wait, in Go?
Add deferred to deferred.
In this? This is literally just rewriting the function with that appended to the start of it, and then I have a generic function trap that I always append to. So you can do whatever you want. You can add environment variables to this, and they will show up. You could add a full while statement to this and just have it hang on exit.
But you could make a method like this. Oh yeah, I want to see it. So can you kind of like capture using the closures?
You can modify a function to change function.
You can't modify a function in the function?
Okay.
This is a really easy thing to check.
I'm pretty sure you can, but you wouldn't change the language.
Just sleep and then defer itself. Or
Yes, I go to
defer itself and then sleep.
Let's see. I can't believe I didn't cover if and while statements. I feel... So yeah, you can rewrite a function within itself.
yes.
Perfectly legal.
Okay. Alright, so wait, defer your own function.
By the way, just to make sure this is working, because let's go ahead and I do not think these temps are.
No. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to cause your system to crash. I don't know what. It must have.
No, I won't. These are the temporary directories generated by maketemp. Just to make sure that defer still works, because I am using it and it worked last time I did this. There is one temporary directory there, and there shouldn't be. I don't know where that came from, but I've gotten this to work before, so whatever. It's broken now. Oh well. It worked before. Anyhow, one thing I should mention, scripts do have while and if statements. They're really simple. They take an argument, they take a program to run, and whatever that program's exit code is, if that exit code is 0, it'll run as a true, and if it's any other exit code, it will fail. So I'm saying while true, it's actually going to run the command true, and the command true is just a command that returns the success exit code, and there's another command false that does the opposite. This sounds kind of annoying because you might have to write like a program that returns an exit code to do a bunch of tests. There's a program called test that has a bunch of arguments you can run to return true and false depending on things, like this will check if bin is a directory and return true if it is and false otherwise. But having to write while test over and over again is really annoying. So there's actually another program that is an alias to test called open square bracket. Now that is an actual program. And it's just the same thing as test, except instead of having arguments, it runs whatever is between the square brackets. So that's how you write tests. So this will keep running as long as this directory exists, which is not what we want. There's another one called if. It's got a slightly different syntax. Fee instead of ends are done because they're annoying. I did. There's if-then statements. I don't think there's any other control constructs that I've missed that are really important to know. Those are like the two most important. Now you have functions, while loops, if statements, variables. What? No.
ESAC.
Case ESAC.
So painful. What about what we've got?
We're actually at our time limit, by the way. Do we have to? Are they like strict this semester? Okay.
Maybe 10 minutes. We have last time.
No, I mean like it's already 30, whatever. As long as they don't complain, I don't care.
If anyone hasn't signed in yet,
So I could just show you more crazy things you can do with ZSH, like the defer statements, because I have a few different ones like that. But before that, is there anything in particular that people would be interested in seeing? Like any subject area?
What was that?
Bat Lab?
Yeah. There's a file called that.
Why don't you just-
It was supposed to be a basics math library in Dash.
Wait, what? Is that possible?
Yeah, you would.
It does work.
There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with that.
How do you do-
There's a site that my friends and I use. I think it's called Coding Games.
I haven't signed in, so make sure you keep
Do,
that.
like, code competitions against each other. There's one where it's like you can use whatever programming language you want. You have to do some little code also, right? So one of them is like find the factorization of the number. And the competition is going to do it in as few characters as possible. So I chose Dash. And luckily, there's a program called Factor.
Where is it?
It does exactly what the assignment was. So I just did that.
What were you trying to do?
Factor a number.
Oh. Is there a program called Factor?
Yeah.
Wow.
Type in a number.
What is it that you
Oh, man.
The only problem is that the exact format they wanted, so I had to use log to like parse off that very first character. But
Anyhow, just because I do want to show it because I wasted a bunch of time doing it for this. This is the actual module structure. You just have, I'm going to remove this crap. No. The entire implementation is in that use.zsh file.
Why don't you have GPL?
Ignore the standard.lib file because that's something else. But basically, it's like Python. If you have a file, if you import a file called, if you do like use std, the first thing it will do is look in this directory for a file called std.zsh, and if it's there, it'll load it. It'll also load anything in the std directory. And basically, the way it does the tree is whenever you use like std, any functions declared in that are going to be renamed as std/function name if they are declared public in that file. So if we go into std /list and we cat asd, I'm actually going to do this example. We have that public function there, and if we did use std.list, it would load this file and we'd get std test1 and test2. And you can also have, there's also a getVar and setVar for private variables inside of these modules. And it just kind of hides all these using clever renaming rules that hopefully you'll never trample. But I can't really guarantee that. It's using here docs. I discovered, interestingly, if you have a here doc where the end token is unquoted, it does expansions in the here doc. But if you quote it, it turns expansions off. So you actually can use here docs for function declarations, and it will not expand any of the variables inside. What? No, not if you have quotes around the end token. See this quote? See these two quotes? No, if you have these quotes here, it'll disable expansion. If I just had end instead of quote end, there would be expansion. It is weird. I'm glad it's there though, because otherwise this wouldn't work because of all these function declarations, because this public function is really just something taking the declaration as standard in and doing clever renaming rules using that functions array from before. And as you import things, it starts to build up like a module name prefix and all this crazy stuff. Closures also do exist in ZSH, I've discovered. If you want to see something very interesting. No! So I will show you some local scope. Here is some local scope. If I have this test func, that ASD, oh, I'm sorry, I need to run test func. That is locally scoped, so it won't print anything. But they are actually properly They are properly closured. So this will actually print 4. Oh. And I've abused this also in the module system. So this does have closures. What I am not entirely, I haven't checked this yet actually. Let's see what happens if I do this. I don't know if this works.
That has to work.
It does. So yes, ZSH has full closures. Don't use bash, use ZSH.
I'm sure Bash has closures too. Can you pass around functions?
So you cannot pass around functions, but you can pass a function name around and then you use the functions array to effectively. And what you can do, if you want to pass around variables and functions, so let's say I want to pass in ASD, there's a trick for this. It is a very funny trick.
What is eval? Eval's evil. Eval's the way to get code.
So this will actually, let's see. If I then call test func, what's actually happening here is this eval is seeing the string ASD and it's echoing that value. So that's how you can pass variable names around. That's what the eval is actually going to end up seeing in this case. So yes, you can pass variable names around. You can use a similar hack to pass function names around and call those. So if you wanted to, you could treat this as a functional language and write composing functions that create new functions that compose other functions and such.
I'm pretty sure that Bash and ZSH have like indirect variables, so you don't have to use eval.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
Forget the syntax, but it's way better because you can't.
So you can do that. Well, you can't inject code. Well, I guess you actually can't inject code here because it's echoed.
In that case, yeah, but if you use eval otherwise.
Anyhow, well, I'm not too worried about code injection in this case anyhow. The other thing you can do is, let's say this is something I do like to do, is you can do this. You can run
What is that dollar sign? What is that?
right here.
No, the like wild dollar sign.
Yeah.
What is
So what you'll see is the dollar sign, that prints a variable, right? So it's actually going to replace this first, so that the outer string that it's running ends up being true. So then it runs the command true and replaces that the second level up.
I don't think you need outer parentheses.
That's for running a command. So I'm actually running whatever value is as a command.
But I think while will that for you.
So I can run this.
Yeah, I think while does that do it already. Yeah, you need to remove the outer parentheses. It'll just run test without those. So just running the outer parentheses.
I've done this before and this has worked for me.
Just remove the outer parentheses.
Oh, because while's going to run the command. You're right. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm being stupid. There you go. So you can do hacky little things like that and it will expand them. I actually have done this before, so I have no idea why it worked, but apparently it did.
It might just be like ZSH nice.
ZSH might very well be. Half of the stuff that I showed is kind of undocumented, so I think functions is undocumented. Functions is documented, that hacky thing. What else? I'm trying to think of. I could probably pull stuff up to talk about all day. Is there anything else that you are interested in, like seeing in particular? Well, I think I'm pretty much done unless there's anything else interesting
So try
in here.
shift control, you not control.
I mean, public decision.
Shift Control U.
Shift Control U. I was reading documentation.
Do we have anything else interesting in here?
I have to make some comments.
Not really.
Sign off.
What?
I have to make a few comments before you sign off.
Yeah, I'm just checking to see if there's. I don't think there is. So other than that, the only other really thing to scripting is learn a bunch of commands. You can find a command for like half the things you want to do. I'm not going to cover most. Like I said, I'm not going to cover that in here. But as far as the shell goes, that's like a quick run through of how to use the shell. Go ahead.
I'm going to shitpost on the live stream now.
You're going to shitpost on the live stream?
Yeah.
Well, feel free, I guess. I'm going to sign it, don't worry.
Alright guys, be sure to subscribe, smash that like button. Let's get to 100,000 likes.
Is this still recording?
Yeah, this is on the live stream. 100,000 likes and
Stallman will come here.
and Josh will shave his face.
In the sidebar over here, or-
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna leave something down in the comments.
Flashing the screen with annotations, like.
Oh my god. Next week there'll be something else. Who knows what it'll be. Awesome. Josh, turn this off because I have no idea how to use your computer.
There is a power button.
Yeah.
Okay, this video will have to be